Could I have approval of minutes, please? Second. All in favor? Aye. So moved. Committee work plan.
No changes to the committee work, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Comments, completion day update, tab
Okay.
2.
Yes. I'd just like to add, we did, in the packet for all the board members, is a response, the open response from the December CPOC, where questions were raised on CCTV availability or readiness for M8 and M9 car procurements. Commitments. MTA committed $581 million in January, 79% of the plan commitments. New York City Transit committed $458 million, or 75% of its plan. This is due to delay in FTA funding of the 2009 track and switch program for $158 million. Long Island Railroad committed $27 million, or 100% of its plan. Metro North $2 million, 100% of its plan. Capital Construction $92 million, or 101% of its plan. Bridges and Tunnels $2 million, or 100% of its plan. Completions. MTA completed $136 million in January. This is 108% of the planned completions of $126 million. This is due to New York City Transit completion of the Castleton Bus Depot for $10 million 1 month in advance of schedule. Long Island Railroad completed $19 million, or 100% of its plan, and no other agencies had planned completions in January.
Wonderful. We're going to New York City Transit. Our Chief Engineer, Connie, you're up.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about our plans for 2008 and what's coming up in 2009. In 2008, we committed $2.4 billion, which was a healthy year if you look at our 5-year average. And next slide, about $100 billion or $1 billion of that was in rolling stock, and another $400 million or so was in stations, with the Brighton Line and Bleecker the main ones. For completions, $2.7 billion, another very big year for us. In addition to another billion or so in rolling stock, Grand Avenue was a major completion. And then ATS, the completion at the Rail Control Center, and some other signal jobs for other major completions. For 2009, we're in the same territory, $2.7 billion, but only about $350 million or so of that is in rolling stock in the light blue. So it's a heavy year for us in terms of putting work into the ground. And by the way, those commitments do not include any stimulus projects. That's base program. Some of the major station jobs, the 2 Rockaway jobs have already been awarded in January, and the other 2 jobs are out for bid right now. We're looking at April awards. Culver, we plan to award this month. It's in the board book. Flood mitigation, that photo in the middle is out on the Queens Boulevard line. Mm-hmm.
Connie, from the Capital Construction or Transit Committee this morning, it said Culver was 178. Why is it 195?
You know what? That's the structural work alone, and then the 4th Avenue interlocking is on the next page. Got That's it. Part of it. Yes, thank you. Signals, there's that 4th Avenue interlocking on Culver, so they're in the same construction contract. CBTC on the Flushing line is our biggest contract of this 5-year capital program. Clara Hale Bus Depot at the end of the year is another major commitment for us, and then a variety of vehicles, but again, this is not a big year for us in vehicles. For completions, again, $2.7 billion, that's our number. Another big year for us. Stations, big one will be Columbus Circle, which will be finished this summer. Various jobs in infrastructure and facilities, including on the right is the flood mitigation measure that's being employed in Lower Manhattan.
Why is it so elaborate?
I'm sorry?
That flood mitigation thing,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that looks to have a bicycle, benches, and other appurtenances.
Well, what you need to raise it, but you can't just raise it 6-8 inches because it's a tripping hazard. So you need to do something. So we've put benches on it and the bike racks, working with DOT and others. DOT owns the sidewalks, and so we turn these into essentially a sidewalk amenity. as well.
Oh.
You know, I could get that for you, but the main work is really is the civil work. It's reconditioning the vent grates, which are in poor shape. So I would imagine I could get the information for you on what's on top, but I suspect it's a very small percentage of the total cost. But if you like that, I'll get that for you.
Also, if I could interject, we really expected terrific resistance to putting these in various places, and they did such a good job designing them and selling them to communities is that they're actually, we have people asking for them instead of opposing them.
Then you should be able to do them cheaper.
This is one of those that no good deed goes unpunished.
And they do seem to be working out on the Queens Boulevard line. We're seeing, you know, an improved performance with whatever rain is coming up. These were all rush projects. We had an 18-month deadline to get our 6 locations on the MTA's top 10 list done from, you know, September of '07 when, you know, shortly after the flood. So this was a huge effort. Signals, Sonnet will be the major focus this year. And then a variety of other things, including a lot of rail cars will be completed this year.
You said before that the $4 billion budget for rolling stock, what percentage is that of the total rolling stock?
Of the total rolling stock.
So I'm assuming your total rolling stock is buses and
How many vehicles is it?
$1 billion make up of our total. How often are we running?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know that. It's I don't know, Howard, if you know what we can get that for you. Yeah, how many? You want to know how many cars have been purchased? Okay,
We
can
have
get that.
we have 6,000 plus buses, 6,000 plus, you know, subway and train cars. So this isn't a huge portion. We got an awful lot of cars. They're very expensive. It's less than 10. Less than 10.
480.
Every year, what is that going to cost on ongoing basis?
Right. There's a whole fleet strategy. We can get that for you.
Yeah, that's been around, but this is all part of it. This is a good news one, not a bad news one.
Yeah, 480 vehicles was that. Okay.
480 vehicles into 12,000.
Yeah, on both the buses and the subway cars right now, we're not quite replacing as quickly as we should. We have a lot of buses over 12 years of age that are really problematic, and we're running subway cars that are well over 40 years is when we would like to get them out of the system.
She's doing the BIM.
Yes. I have something else that I would like to talk to you about. It's a major initiative that we're undertaking in our department. It's what's actually happening in the industry, and that's the implementation of BIM. BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. What it is you may be familiar with 3D modeling of renderings of contract documents. This takes this sort of a quantum leap forward. These are models that it's CAD drawings, but it's CAD drawings in 3D. And then what it adds on top of that is it ties every object in your model to a database. It allows you to do really a life cycle approach to your capital programming. This is a 3D model of the 10th Avenue substation. The coordination of disciplines, everybody's working on the same model. We expect to see improved productivity, better communication with our stakeholders. They can actually sort of do a fly-through or a walk-through of a structure. Improved quality control because everybody's working on the same document. And it facilitates analysis because you can tie it in with airflow analysis, smoke detection, structural analysis, and so forth. The other big difference is that you don't draw lines, you draw objects, you draw solid objects. And we live in a 3D world. We live in a world of objects. Right now, we take our three-dimensional world and convey it into two-dimensional drawings. We give those to the contractor. The contractor takes those two-dimensional drawings and then puts them back into a three-dimensional construction. What we're doing is trying to stay in 3 dimensions the whole way. Our first project out of the box, I asked every design manager if they were starting a project last year to do it in BIM, was this 10th Avenue substation. We had a 10-month schedule for PE. A month into it, we took the project team and put them in a dark room with a bunch of computer screens, and they did training for 6 weeks. They ended up...
Where is that?
It's out in Brooklyn.
Oh, it should be, it is 10th Street, correct?
I'm sorry, 10th Street, yes. They completed the work, even including the cost of the training. They completed it under budget and on schedule. So at least as the first one out of the box, I have high hopes. And the design team's very enthusiastic. This is what everybody wants to do now. This is a survey that was done with a laser beam. You stick this apparatus there, and it shoots what we call a dot cloud of existing conditions. Then you put it in a computer and you make different things, different colors, but you can provide a very accurate survey. Contractors are using this now. They'll survey a facility before they go in and do work because they can accurately fabricate from the model in the shop and pre-assemble and bring stuff out. It saves them time in doing their work and money. This is the 10th Street model, and our chief architect is going to manipulate a little bit, give you a little sense of what it can do. This is actually a PDF file taken from the model. You can zoom in on it. You can rotate it. So it's an existing building that we are rehabilitating the building and replacing the equipment in it. So you can see the stairwell there, and see the piles. You could turn different components on and off. Is there anything else you want to show us on that, Judy? Okay, so you get a little flavor of it. So this is the way we'll be working in the future. I can tell you the fastest growing segment of BIM use is in the contractors industry. The contractors are already using it. When I've gone out and met with contractors, they're sort of ho-hum about it because they've already started taking 2D drawings and converting them into BIM to facilitate construction. And contractors are all about the bottom line. They aren't doing this to make pretty pictures. They are doing this because it makes sense for them. I know that 5 years from now I'm not going to be able to hire anyone out of college unless I'm a full BIM operation. In fact, the other agencies are doing this too. We have a benchmarking exercise with other agencies operating in the New York City area, and everybody is getting into BIM. I expect that my clients, the Department of Subways and Department of Buses, it will help them during design. They don't always understand, maintenance folks, they may not understand 2D drawings, but if I can do a walkthrough of the structure as if it's a real structure, they'll be able to identify things that they can, that they would like to have changed. And then because you have a database attached to it, that database during construction has your specifications, has your cost information, your delivery, your schedule information. But once the project is handed over to the user department, they will use that same database to do their life cycle maintenance and replenishment. And we expect it to provide better schedules for us and better costs for our designs down the road. Any questions?
Cost-benefit analysis, what it costs to implement this program versus what we expect to see as rewards for using it.
Yeah, I don't think I have enough data yet, but what I have anecdotally is that my designs are going to come in cheaper.
This is a big deal. This is a huge, huge change in how people make things, look at things, fix things. It's just enormous. Ultimately, it's a real benefit. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What do I got next?
I think Michael is
Michael?
going to speak? Ronnie.
Ronnie, come on down. Or you want to be up there? Where would you like to be? Sure, anywhere that works. Whenever you're ready.
Consider me ready. I'm speaking first about our 2009 goals on commitments and completions. if this is a ready handout that everybody has at their table, it's just a few slides. I'd be happy to just talk from the slides themselves. The first slide is about our 2009 commitments on East Side access. And as you can see, 2009 is going to be an incredibly busy year for us. We're going to be awarding approximately $180 million worth of projects on East Side access alone. The largest of which is one that is currently in procurement now, which is the Queens Board tunnels and structures, the soft ground tunnels in Queens that will be under the Sunnyside Yard. I'll move on to the...
$180 million?
No. The overall program cost, I'm sorry, the overall program cost for East Side access and commitments is a little over $877 million. In 2009, on 2nd Avenue Subway, the next slide, we will be advancing the 96th Street station and the first part of the 86th Street station, which has us committing nearly $380 million worth of work to advance 2nd Avenue Subway. On Fulton, the Fulton Street Transit Center, we're about to advertise the AC mezzanine and the JMZ, some of the vertical improvements in the station, and that will commit, and these are overall program costs. They're not obviously just the third-party contract costs, a little over $211 million. And on South Ferry, the last element of the whole South Ferry Plaza, which is the surface plaza work, a little over $20 million. Moving on to our completions for 2009, those will be exclusively focused on the South Ferry station. And completing the station will have completions nearly $495 million. And that concludes the 2009 commitment and completion report for capital construction.
Any questions? Yep.
What we've had, obviously, a variety of issues, as Andrew keeps reminding me, regarding 2nd Avenue Subway and 96th Street and its effect on the neighborhood, for lack of a better term. Could you give us a brief explanation about how you feel these commitments will affect the neighborhood from 96th Street down, and are we learning different ways to do things to have less of an impact on the residents of the community?
I don't think Mitch was here when Howard spoke about this before.
Sure. A couple of things. The 96th Street station work, I don't think will further exacerbate the situation, because the area, the street surface work, is what has been so challenging for that community. It's a very narrow street at that area. In 86th Street, we are looking hard at how to minimize the impacts. It's a different community at that point, and the utility relocation work is the 86th Street work is just utility relocations. So we're trying to minimize the effect on the community. One thing that Michael Herdnichanu spoke about earlier today is doing a little more outreach to try to see if there are things that we could be doing that perhaps we haven't recognized are needed for the shopkeepers, for example, and doing actual walk-arounds in the neighborhood to get real-time ideas from people, in addition to the things that we've already done, the Shop 2nd Avenue campaign and working with the local elected officials. So yes, we are very aware of that.
South Ferry, when is that going to be complete?
I would say over the next few weeks. I mean, what Michael talked about earlier in our committee this morning was that we're doing some of the last canopy work and granite installations in one of the entrances, since we had the opportunity to take the time to review the ADA platform issues that have now been resolved. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a few weeks away.
April 1st?
I don't have a date. I think what was said earlier today is that when that work is completed, working with headquarters and New York City Transit, will make an announcement for a formal opening.
And these commitments do not include any stimulus money?
Correct. That's correct.
These were regularly scheduled aspects of the plan, separate and apart from whatever it is we may
Additions,
get
right.
from the federal government for the stimulus.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? None, okay, what am I now? Ronnie, you go again.
Thank you. I thought I would take the opportunity to review some of the procurement challenges associated with these mega projects. In reviewing the Carter-Burgess reports, they have talked about, and the FDA has raised this issue, why does it take so long to award contracts in the mega program? And frankly, until 2007, the beginning of 2007, our history was pretty good. We had awarded a dozen contracts, a little over $1.5 billion worth of work, generally within our estimates and within the procurement schedules we had set up for ourselves. What we saw in 2007, and we've talked about it at this group before, is market conditions really began to impact our ability to make timely awards. We had tried to award 4 contracts, a little over $2 billion worth of work. We were only able to successfully award 3 of them, and it really was starting to impact our ability to manage the procurement cycles. So I thought I would spend a few moments this morning talking about why contract awards get delayed. And I've identified a series of problems, and I'll spend a few minutes talking about each. They stem from lack of competition, to getting bids that are far exceeding our estimates, to the fact that these are complex projects with big, complicated designs. Bonding requirements plays a role, and lastly, contractor responsibility issues have also played a role on this. So why is there insufficient competition? Well, we've talked about market conditions, the complexity of these projects, the size of these projects. There are a limited pool of experienced contractors and subcontractors. These are contractors who have experience doing heavy civil work, who have experience working in an operating railroad and transit environment, which for other contractors is perceived as extremely risky. We're competing with projects in the New York market. Everybody's aware of the major DEP initiatives in terms of tunneling. They're not putting trains in those tunnels. They're putting water through the tunnels, but it's a competition. It's the same market. We have aggressive procurement schedules. You know, we try to juggle our procurement schedules so they don't overlap, but sometimes they do, and it creates a problem for the bidding community. And contractors tell us that they are at capacity in terms of their own workload. And lastly, contractors are competing for the most productive labor. Certain contractors have relationships with unions, and it's always about trying to get the A team off the bench into their projects. So some of our problems that impact competition, I mentioned overlapping procurements. We do take a look-ahead approach to trying to schedule the procurements, but frequently, for a variety of things that I'm about to talk about, they do get delayed and overlap. Contractors will not bid on all jobs. These jobs cost millions of dollars to put proposals and bids together on, and contractors are very selective about what they're bidding on these days. We've been told that as a public owner, we have conservative contract terms, and our risk allocations are conservative. Now, here we've been working, we took some of the recommendations from the Blue Ribbon panel and have been looking to make improvements in terms of risk allocations between contractors. But the reality is that they want public owners to share way more risk than we frequently can afford to take on. We've been told that it's difficult to deal with public owners, and MTA is overall considered fairly responsive. We're a pretty good public owner, but for some contractors who are not familiar with us and not familiar with our market, we're trying to entice them to get to know us better and do some more industry outreach there. And lastly, and I'll come back to this, we have a bonding requirement that you're talking about jobs that could be in excess of a few hundreds of millions of dollars. The bonding requirement becomes no longer just a ministerial issue for contractors. It really taps their capacity, and it limits their ability to bid on other work. Just a few minutes on why bids exceed estimates and how it relates to longer procurement schedules. The reality is when you open a proposal and it's significantly higher than what you expected, and we've seen this, it takes longer to go through the issues to try to get a good contract negotiated. We've seen excessively large markups. So sometimes we'll put our estimates together with their proposals, go line by line, and labor and hours and materials look pretty good, and then you get to that bottom line where the markup is just unprecedentedly high. Everybody's talked over the last couple of years about material costs that were escalating, limitations on equipment and skilled labor. So how does that affect the time period for a procurement? Well, if a contractor tells us that they perceive a risk on the cost of steel or the availability of concrete or the cost of concrete in negotiations, we have the ability to handle that through escalation provisions. But again, it does take up some time, and it chews up time in those negotiations. Another factor that has affected our bid costs was when we were bundling work up together. The Blue Ribbon panel spoke about this too. We were bundling work really to try to get schedule. You trade off one for the other. And the inclusion of different types of complex work was starting to really increase bids. So we've broken that up. I mentioned the 86th Street station job. We're doing a separate small package for utility relocation, not just one big giant contract. And lastly, when you're in negotiations, you're dealing with excessively high proposals. It can trigger rescoping and repackaging, and that takes time during a procurement phase. So, my observation is that all the contractors that we've talked to have been placing risk in different places. And so it's hard up front to put out a package that equally addresses everybody's concerns. So we end up dealing with that in negotiations. Different contractors perceive risk differently. But that does take longer. It does result in protracted negotiations. We've been rescoping during negotiations, but that takes engineering. And then you have to be careful. You have to be careful that you're doing it right. Obviously, it has impacted on some of our project budgets. So what we're trying to do here is balance a good procurement with a good contract. A few moments on how the complexity of the projects themselves can impact the procurement schedule. Specifications, these are jobs that are multi-volume specifications. The reality is that design issues can arise during the procurement phase, and they need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed carefully, cautiously, deliberatively. Were the design documents sufficient? When I see hundreds of questions coming in that require answers from the engineering teams, I have to ask myself, are these good designs? Are we putting good contracts on the street? Sometimes there's substantive issues. Sometimes, and this has been a real-life experience, the contractors are manipulating the market. They're trying to scare their competition off by throwing in hundreds of questions. That's a reality that's very hard to deal with. And as I mentioned, additional engineering can be required during the procurement phase, and that's something that takes time to do carefully and not make a mistake. On bonding requirements, this is something the Blue Ribbon panel studied extensively and made... Yes, sir.
On the issue of design, whose responsibility is it generally to respond to the questions that bidders are putting forward? Is it us, or is it the design firm that we used?
It depends. The question may be arising from the specification, the design, the drawings themselves, and we get the answers from the design firms that we use. But we take responsibility for the answers, too. On bonding, what the surety market has told us is there's a $500 million limit set. They really won't bond jobs in excess of $500 million. That causes a challenge during negotiations also, because you then have to spend time with what is generally joint venture teams that have multiple surety relationships to try to negotiate maybe a base contract and options so that their bonding capacity isn't tied up for the entire value. We are careful to break up our contracts to not have contract values that will exceed the contractor's bonding capacity. Long contract durations can also tie up capacity for long periods of time. Contractors have told us that they don't like to see contracts that go out over 2, 3, 4-year time periods because they're concerned about tying up their own bonding capacity over that period of time. And recently, we're getting a sense that sureties doing financial capacity reviews on contractors, we're getting a little concerned that the credit market is creating a problem for those contractors themselves. So bonding used to be a ministerial issue. It used to be all about just submitting a form, getting the bond correctly, and now we're seeing that these issues raise substantive issues that need to be negotiated or need to be dealt with during the procurement phase, and that can take some time as well. And the last factor I wanted to just touch on was contractor responsibility. You know, we deal with contractors. They're very large. They're typically joint ventures. They have multiple affiliates and other elements of their joint ventures. And contractor responsibility issues can occur at any time. You really can't predict that in terms of working that into a procurement schedule. As you may know, we're required under the MTA all-agency guidelines to vet all our contractors and put them through a thorough vetting process to determine that they're responsible contractors. That means not just their experience, their financial capacity, but their integrity as well. And integrity vetting can trigger responses to our questionnaires that require us to do additional work to come through the responsibility determination. The IG can be involved, headquarters here can be involved, and we ultimately need to have a good, thorough vetting. That can take time, but it's not something that you should short shrift in the procurement process. So my conclusions, we do need to learn from experience. We had been working with very rigid procurement schedules. You know, if it was a bid, it was 3 months. If it was an RFP, it was 6 months. That may not be the right answer. You know, the right answer may be that we need to work longer procurement cycles into schedules. We're trying to put out very good contract documents to limit questions. We do a very thorough review of these very massive contract documents, and we're constantly challenging our design teams to be as comprehensive and as tight as possible in their designs. We're reviewing estimates against real-time market conditions so as to avoid any delays associated with sticker shock, when, you know, that aha moment when you open up the proposals or the bids. And also, picking up on a blue ribbon panel recommendation, we're coordinating better, but not completely, with other owners. So one of the things the Blue Ribbon Panel had done was commission Carter Burgess to do a master schedule of major procurements in this area. Maybe that's something that should be refreshed periodically to take another look at. In the end, I think where we are is we need to retain flexibility in our procurement process. The use of RFPs are extremely important in the mega program. We're lucky to have that legislative authority to use negotiated procurements. But I think we can do it better. I think there are opportunities to improve how we execute on that process. As I mentioned, we're going to use project specifics to determine the right procurement schedule. This falls under that axiom, plan the work and work your plan. And finally, the balance here is always what's in our best interest. We're balancing the need to meet a schedule, but we're also trying to get the best contract awarded that we can.
Thank you. That was great. Any questions? Mark?
Are we actually required to have 100% bonding?
The requirement is twofold. There is a finance law requirement that requires payment bond. That's a legislative requirement. There's an FTA requirement on federally funded projects that requires a full performance bond, but that has a waiver process built into it. The problem in this market is, and the sureties have told us this repeatedly, the payment bond and the performance bond are linked. And so if you're requiring one, you get the other.
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Just one quick thing. So you did mention Carter Burgess had some hand in generating this study, or
the schedule.
And just wondered whether you had any comments now that this has been put forward.
You're referring to the Blue Ribbon Panel schedule?
to Ronnie's presentation?
Yeah, no, as Ronnie's presentation was a result of some of the comments in our reports where we highlighted one of the causes of delays in the mega projects has been a procurement cycle greater than that was planned. And that is why Ronnie then made, she looked at the data we produced, had concurred for the most part, and then thought it would be prudent to just tell you what the issues we discovered.
Jerry, I think the question had to do with the preparation you did in terms of scheduling out all the projects in the region, and what do we intend to do about that?
Well, we for the Blue Ribbon Panel, we did a survey of all the major city agencies, private sector. We looked at NJT because they have a project called ARC, Access to the Region's Core, the tunnel, which is heavy mining project that has a substantial amount of work in Manhattan, school construction authorities, DEP, and we developed, Yankee Stadium, Giant Stadium, just to highlight all the workload, and we took that schedule with the information provided by the agencies, put it into a schedule, and then we actually attempted to man-load the schedule by craft so that we were able to look at various union trades and identified shortages of specific unions at that time. We also looked at a lot of rehab work, and that was done 2 years ago, roughly. And if it was and it should be updated today because of the current environment. Most of the rehab work is probably going away. So where we saw a lot of electricians being a potential shortfall because of rehab work, that's not the case today. The shortages we identified with sandhogs and teamsters and lathers probably will. The lathers probably will be a lot less because we're not doing any concrete, buildings. There won't be any hotels being built. But some of the trades are still going to be short, and we should be continually updating it. And I would presume, the next IEC will continue to update that information for OCO.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Doreen.
Ronnie, first of all, you have an amazing capacity to take a complicated subject and make it very, very clear, and I don't know many that can do it as well as you can, so thanks. As I go through some of the staff reports on these procurements, I notice that our estimates are here, and the bids are usually up here, which leads me to wonder if we're smoking something or if we've been had.
Right.
And I think you've explained some of those dynamics very well. The Blue Ribbon Panel, though, in looking at some of its recommendations, I hope that we're never put in a situation where we as an agency have to give up any remedies available to us to pursue folks who are not doing a responsible job on a project. And I think that might be some of the tension.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't want up front to give away a right or a recourse that you'll need later on. It's very tempting, perhaps, to do that in a negotiation where you have a contractor say to you, if you would relieve me of this schedule constraint, I would lower my price by a few $1 million. But that may be absolutely the wrong thing to do. So that's the balancing that we're doing.
I don't mind being called a difficult owner if, in fact, that's what we're doing.
I think Ronnie's takeaway is it takes an awful lot of work to spend $1 billion.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ronnie. Carter Burgess, what you got? Anything for today?
Now, our reports speak for themselves. If anyone has a specific question, I would be most pleased to answer it.
Anybody have anything for them? Yes, Andrew, wouldn't pass you by.
Jerry, in your line structures section of the agenda, the head subject says the line structures program is to bring all 228 miles into a state of good repair. Do you have any time limit or any expectation as to when that might be?
I do not, and I think it would probably be a function of available funds, just like with the stations program, the goal there. But if there's no money available, the time will just continue to go out further. However, I do know that the agency works on the most deteriorated places first. I mean, safety is the primary concern. So any project that creates a safety issue will be a project that goes to the top of the list.
The reason I ask that is we've heard a proposed date for stations. It went from 2030 to 2050. but we haven't heard a proposed date for the line structure, so that's why I was just wondering if it's floating out there somewhere.
No. There's no date.
No date.
There's no date. Anybody else got any questions? Okay, if that's the case, at this time I'd like to call for a motion to go into executive session for the committee to conduct the executive session to discuss matters falling within the enumerated purposes of Section 105D and F of the Open Meetings Law, specifically a litigation matter and a matter leading to discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a corporation. May I have a motion? Second. All in favor? Okay, we're going into it. Thank you, everybody. Audit will be after this.